Is Universal and Blumhouse about to commit blasphemy? Plus, there's blood in the water at Marvel TV. And yeah, we're going to talk about that episode of Doctor Who. All this and more on this week's episode of the Geek Watch Podcast.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 98 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So the weekend's coming up, and we got the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that thing, huh?
Oh, yeah, that thing. Of course, again, we always say, we don't really care much about the game, but we do care about the commercials. I know there's going to be a couple of commercials. They're already announcing some of them. Usually you had to wait until they ran before you knew what they were going to be. But there's a couple of geek-centric commercials. Of course, they're going to do a Walmart commercial, the Walmart delivery service where you go and they pick. And they always do those geek icon crossovers. They're going to do another one. They're going to be doing a Bill and Ted one.
Awesome.
So where it's young. I always get the two mixed up. Which one's Bill and which one's Ted? Who's Keanu playing?
Oh, Keanu is Ted, and
right, that's right.
Alex
Kintner is Bill, right? Mm-hmm. But he's playing himself as young Bill and older Bill.
Aww.
So there's that crossover, and then we get Frank the Pug from Men in Black.
Oh yeah, okay.
There's a Star Wars reference with C-3PO. So there's a bunch of different references in this one. And the one that I thought was really weird was there's going to be a Pringles commercial, a Rick and Morty Pringles commercial, which is going to be as weird as you can imagine. That
makes sense, because Rick and Morty, they're like the infinite universes, and there seem to be infinite flavors of Pringles. I get it.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is the commercial has a lot to do with the flavor mixing. The whole game of taking three,
right, and you have to guess what they are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole deal with you put flavors together and you create new flavors that way. That goes horribly wrong because this is Rick and Morty. So, so there you go. So we got that to look forward to. So I figure there's something majorly geek centric. We can definitely talk about this on the next podcast. But I did want to bring up first, and here's the thing. Let me say this first of all as a disclaimer, okay? Because I know on the last podcast, I was raining pretty heavily on Universal's parade. I'm not necessarily about to do that now, okay? Let me just preface by saying I'm not necessarily raining on their parade by talking about this. This is not my intention. This could be a really good thing or this could be a really bad thing. I haven't decided yet, but I thought I'd bring this up to you and ask you about this. But Universal and Blumhouse, they're apparently working on a reboot of The Thing.
Didn't that already happen?
Yeah, but we don't talk about that.
Okay.
It's supposed to be, the last movie was supposed to be a prequel of John Carpenter's The Thing. Mm-hmm. Although in a real sense it was like a soft reboot. They just didn't call it that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question. It's like, didn't they already do something like that? Now here's
I've never got to see The Thing from Another World, so I haven't seen the original.
You haven't seen the black and white,
so I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely its own thing, and I have seen it.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed it for I mean, John Carpenter's The Thing is not really a remake per se of that one. Mm-hmm. You just basically have a plant-looking Frankenstein.
Okay.
But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed John Carpenter's version of it. I enjoyed Doctor Who's version of it. So, yes, there is a Doctor Who version of The Thing from Another World. It takes place in Antarctica, and it's called The Seeds of Death.
Okay.
It's a Tom Baker episode.
Okay. See, I was thinking of the train episode where it's a David Tennant era.
Right.
They're at that space spa, and then they get on the train, and then something gets into them, and yeah.
Oh, yeah. But there's this great, this was a Tom Baker, Elizabeth Sladen, Sarah Jane Smith version of it, which I enjoyed. And I had seen that before I'd seen any like The Thing or Thing from the Another World. But it's definitely...
Who Goes There? Is that the book?
Yeah. Well,
Who Goes There? Yeah.
It's funny you mention that because here's how this whole thing with Universal and Blumhouse developed. Of course, all this was developed off of the John W. Campbell's novella that was published in 1936, okay?
Oh, wow. That's a lot older than I thought.
Yeah, but here's the thing. A couple of years ago, what happened was they had discovered an extended version of that novella. So apparently he was working on developing it as a full-blown novel. Apparently it hadn't gotten published at the time, but I think it was John Battencourt did a Kickstarter to publish the book. It was entitled Frozen Hell. And basically, it's an extension of that story. It's that story with a lot more background to it.
Okay.
So it's, it's basically the same story. It's just he apparently Campbell was looking to expand it into a full-blown novel, and he did. Just never got around to publishing it, but it's out now, and you can get it.
Wow, that's neat.
And so apparently it was that novel, Frozen Hell, that Universal and Blumhouse bought the rights to.
Okay.
So I guess technically this is not going to be a sequel or a remake to the original Thing from Another World, or even the John Carpenter. It's going to be based off of this novel.
It's going to be its own. Okay.
It's going to be its own thing. So I think I actually have a quote here. Yeah, this is what he said about the book. He said, Frozen Hell expands the Thing story dramatically, giving vital backstory and context to an already incredible tale. So basically, I guess you're going to get a lot more background about the creature and all of that stuff. So
kind of like when Stephen King came out with the big stand. you know, he had the little stand and then he had the big stand. So
well, I think in this case he had the big stand and then he had the colossal stand. So that's basically it. And I understand this movie's being fast tracked. So I'll be interested to see what they do with it. Apparently they're working to get this put out pretty quickly. So it's its own thing, but I mean at the same time, especially with John Carpenter's The Thing, that's a sacred text to a lot of us horror fans. And I think that's part of the reason why that soft reboot that we talked about didn't do so well.
And I guess you don't speak of it now?
Not very much, no.
Well, no, we talked about it a few times, and I think we even mentioned it maybe either last week or the week before. I thought that about I Am Legend. So that's been done 3 times that I can recall on film.
Right.
And really the most faithful one to the novel was The Last Man on Earth, the very first one with Vincent Price.
Right.
That one was the most like the novel. And then when they went to the Mega Man and the Will Smith I Am Legend, they kind of got further and further away from the original novel. So now it's kind of feel like with The Thing, they're trying to go back to what I guess the author really wanted. I'm not sure. Well,
yeah, I would think so. I mean, again, you have this novel that's only really been out for a couple of years, but it was enough to get Universal and Blumhouse excited enough to buy the rights to this, and basically, from my understanding, they're fast tracking this movie, so it may be out in a year or two. So, like I said, this could be a really great thing. This could be a really terrible thing. As of right now, I don't know, but
we'll see.
Well, we'll definitely check that out. We were talking a little bit last week about Seth MacFarlane.
Yes.
Getting this big contract with NBCUniversal. And now with the news coming out, we have a better idea of what's going on, because we've been talking, their streaming service stuff, they must be coming out with, there's a thought that they might be doing a streaming service. Well, they are, which they're calling Peacock, because why wouldn't you? And I guess they
could call it Dun, dun, dun.
Yep, there you go. But it's actually coming out July 15th of this year.
Okay.
So what's interesting about it is, well, it's going to be coming out April 15th. If you have Xfinity or Flex, they'll go ahead and...
that'll just put out their already content that they already have.
Yeah,
and
then
later on they'll put out the new content.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, with NBC and Universal Studios, they'll have a lot of content. And I figure for a lot of us monster kids, the Universal Monsters, that's going to be...
Perfect, yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing about this. It's a tiered service, okay? The first tier is going to be absolutely free. So you'll be able to access Peacock for free.
With commercials.
With commercials, exactly. So you'll have ads, and you'll be limited to the amount of content you can have. I mean, there'll only be selected episodes of the Peacock originals you'll be able to see. Now, if you want more content, you can become a premium member for $4.99 a month, and then you get to watch the full seasons of original projects, and you get more content. Now, you can also up this for $9.99 a month, and then it becomes ad-free at that point. So, depending on, they're giving you the free service so you can get like a taste of it. You know, it's like what YouTube did with their originals, where you could see the
first episode, and then
you had to pay to get behind it.
Pull you in, and then you're watching 3 seasons of Cobra Kai for.
Because that's the way they get you, for sure.
Right.
So, of course, now we've got another entry into the streaming wars. But going to the other side of it, of course, we've been talking about Marvel Television and shows that they've been working with Hulu on. Of course, they had canceled everything on Netflix. And so it kind of made you wonder what was going to happen with shows that they were doing with like Hulu and Freeform and things like that. Well, we're starting to get these answers now, because Marvel has already canceled the Hulu shows Howard the Duck and TIGRA and DAZZLER.
Aw.
Now, these were all in production, but Howard the Duck, Kevin Smith was already writing scripts for this, and he was going to be the showrunner for it. And
was Seth Green going to do the voice again? Or?
I don't know. I would,
because he and
yeah, exactly.
They're pretty tight, aren't they?
I would think so.
I think so. Yeah.
Sure. Now, they haven't said anything. They haven't said anything about M.O.D.O.K or Hitmonkey, but I'm pretty sure they're going to cancel those too. Now, the plan was in Hulu they were going to do these 4 shows, and then they were going to put these shows together, just like they did on Netflix and made the Defenders. In this case, they were going to call them the Offenders. So, but Patton Oswalt was already. He was already on track to be the voice of M.O.D.O.K. So, plans were being made, and like I said, there's nothing official yet on M.O.D.O.K or Hitmonkey, but I have to feel like they're getting ready to cancel them. And I have a feeling that a lot of shows that are on Freeform, like Cloak and Dagger, successful shows, but I feel like Kevin Feige is now pulling everything back in. I think they're wanting as much content as they can for Marvel, and so I think, honestly, they're thinking they don't want to split the audience. They don't want them necessarily, even though, to be fair, Walt Disney, they own part of Hulu. So it's not necessarily that these shows were, playing on this was stuff for the enemy, because, Hulu is partially owned by Disney. So, they'd be making their money either way. But yeah, it just seems like they're going out and killing anything Marvel that they can get their hands on that belongs to them. Obviously the stuff on Sony, well, they've been making stirrings, obviously, but anything Marvel that's on other platforms, they just seem like they're just pulling the plug on left and right. So if I hear anything about M.O.D.O.K, for sure I'll mention something, but I would figure they're going to be gone. We're going to hear something soon, and that they're going to get the plug pulled as well. But as the streaming wars continue, now we get another bidding war. Netflix and Apple TV. Now, we talked about Apple TV before because all they have at this point is their own original content. And not a lot of it, but they definitely have some. But they're making their first move to pull some external content. And they and Netflix are they're both talking to MGM to get streaming stuff from them. Okay. So, of course, with MGM, you get all the James Bond movies, the Mad Max films, Rocky,
Wizard of Oz,
RoboCop.
No, I think Disney bought Wizard of Oz. But.
Yeah. The Pink Panther, things like that. But but the thing is, what people don't realize is that MGM is also producing television content. Now, they're producing television content that's appearing in other platforms. Hulu has The Handmaid's Tale, which is MGM. So the thing is, whoever gets MGM may be getting the Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah,
so
and that's winning all kinds of awards. So, that's one of the hot TV shows right now. So.
Yeah, so which might be a good reason why this bidding is starting to happen. Netflix, they're losing content left and right. Apple needs to pull some content besides what they make themselves because they want to build their own platform. MGM would be a solid jewel in anyone's crown at this point. I think Apple needs it more, but the thing is, Netflix, they're on such a high right now. They got they produced 2 movies that are now up for Best Picture in the Oscars. So, I mean,
they already got all the Emmys.
Yeah.
So let's see. All they need is some music for some Grammy, and then they could produce their own Netflix the Broadway musical, and then they'll have their Tony, so they can EGOT.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, speaking of which, we got to talk about The Witcher for a moment, because there's a couple of things that popped up this week. There's going to be, of course, we're big long wait until season 2 of The Witcher.
Right.
But the tide is over. We're going to get a Witcher anime done by the Legend of Korra studio, and we're supposed to be getting, that's going to happen this summer.
Are they using voices from the game or voices from the show?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know if they're doing either one.
Well, I just found out recently that the original live-action show based on The Witcher called The Hexer, when I believe it was in Dutch. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But the original man who played The Witcher is doing the Dutch dub of the current Witcher. So he's going over their lines and doing it, in his own language. So he gets to play him twice. I think that's really fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But also, speaking of The Witcher, anyone who's listening to this podcast on Spotify, after you're done listening to the podcast, go look for Toss a Coin to Your Witcher. It's now available on Spotify if you love that song. The entire soundtrack, the volume 1 of the soundtrack, is going to be released in its entirety on Spotify.
Isn't it like 8 hours long? I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I thought it was really long.
Yeah. It's already been released. It was released on the 24th. So they had started with that one song, but now you can get the entire volume 1 of the soundtrack on Spotify. It's since the 24th. So definitely, if you got to get your Witcher on and, you haven't had enough of that song yet.
Yeah, it's not stuck in your head at all.
If it's not stuck.
No, if that is stuck in your head, there's still some other great songs in the show, to go listen to. And they move the story along just as well, and they're just as good. Not as much of an earworm, but they're fun to listen to.
There you go. Let's talk a little bit about, of course, when we're recording on Thursday now. We normally record on Tuesday, but of course today is Thursday at the time of this recording, and episode 2 of PICARD is going to be coming out this evening.
Oh, okay.
I did catch episode 1.
What'd you think?
Well, here's the thing. I can understand why some people don't like it. There is this trend of things getting dark, doing the apocalyptic version of your beloved. I mean, everything seems to take a dark turn. I mean, Doctor Who took a dark turn. This is definitely a dark turn for the Federation. I don't know how much you know about the show at all, but you're basically the amount of time that's passed between Star Trek Nemesis and now is the same amount of time that's passed in the show.
Okay.
So
like 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It felt like it was 98.
Yeah.
Was the last.
Yeah. So you basically have Picard, who's no longer part of Starfleet, and you find out the reason why he's no longer part of Starfleet is because he quit. He quit in a huff. A huff is not, I would say, I think that's downplaying how angry he was with Starfleet. What had happened was and going back to Nemesis, and going back to J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, the supernova, the Romulan sun going supernova and destroying Romulus. And so you had the situation where, the Romulans are without a home. And so Picard, he organizes this massive rescue operation, hundreds upon hundreds of ships to go to Romulus to basically save the Romulans.
Yeah, an exodus.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, what happens, though, in the show is a group of synthetics attack Mars, and they basically destroy the Utopia Planitia shipyards at Mars. This is where, of course, Starfleet makes their ships, where all the Enterprises were built at Utopia Planitia, and they set Mars on fire. They say to this day, Mars is on fire. This is basically... this is a very, I would say, thinly veiled reference to 9/11. That's exactly how they feel about it, because nobody saw this coming. And so basically, Starfleet decides to do and the Federation decides to do is they're like, okay, well, forget this. We are too strained. This is, we need to cut ourselves off. And so they abort the entire operation to rescue the Romulans. And of course, Picard's not happy about this.
Yeah.
And of course they justify this, but well, they've been our enemies forever. It's, it's no big deal. And he figured it was a big deal. And so he decided to play the card, well, we're either going through with this or I'm quitting. And they were like, well, we're sorry to see you go.
Wow.
And so the Romulans were left to hang out to dry. And Picard basically goes back to France and he's on his vineyard. And that's the start. That's the start of all of this.
It's a bit of a Titan storyline to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he lives on his farm. He's making his wine. He's living on his vineyard. He has 2 Romulans who help him with the farm. And then, of course, if you've seen the trailers, you know that an individual shows up, this young woman who is just sitting there minding her own business, having drinks with her boyfriend in their apartment when these 3 black-clad, ninja-looking soldiers beam in, kill her boyfriend, and try to put a black sack over her head and kidnap her. And then something clicks on her and she becomes Bruce Lee and beats the crap out of him and escapes. But she has this image of Picard and feels like she needs to go and find him. And so if you've seen the trailers, you see there's a lot of references to Data. And of course, that's why, there's all these issues. There have been attempts to duplicate Data with limited success. And for some reason, these synthetics rebelled and
bunch of lures.
Possibly. But at the same time, I look at it this way. It's like whenever, regardless of whether you created them or not, when you take a life form and you attempt to enslave them, eventually they're not going to be cool with it. Regardless of whatever situation they're in, eventually they're going to rebel. It just makes sense. But you get this idea. The Federation is definitely flawed. For the longest time, even since Data, they were wanting to create a bunch of synthetics. For all intents and purposes, they were creating themselves a new slave class. For all intents and purposes. And I mean, it's why they were creating, synthetics in Blade Runner. I mean, this is a story.
That's how you get Terminator.
Yeah, that's how there you go. So it turns out that this woman that went all Super Saiyan, that she may be created from the positronic matrix of Data.
Okay.
So in a sense, she's like a daughter. What surprised me is they killed her off right in the middle of the show. So it's like she winds up dying. She winds up getting killed, but apparently she has a twin sister because these synthetics have to be grown in pairs. So there's another one. And then, of course, you find out that the Romulans are living on a Borg cube, and that's how they end the show. Now, the episode that's coming up, I think that we're going to see Riker and Troy in this one. I guess they're no longer part of Starfleet either. And, of course, they've been married for a while, and so they're...
wow, okay.
But, the thing about it is I can understand why some people would not like this show because, again, you're taking... the hopefulness of Star Trek. That was the thing about Star Trek, even from the beginning. You have all these races and creeds living together. And, it's an ideal vision of the future, for sure. And now you're sort of taking that away and going, yeah, well, Starfleet, they're a bunch of jerks. They basically, forgive me for using this term, but it's apropos for this. They decided to build a wall.
Yeah.
That's basically what they did. And so now I know a lot of people are like, why does Star Trek have to suddenly become all political? And I'm like, since when? It's like
since 1963. When was it? When was it?
Yeah, you think it's like, yeah, but I'm black on the right side. He's black on the left side.
You look the exact same to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, and science fiction's always gotten political, but the thing about it is, I think just in our times, it's like, in the 50s and the 60s, we were looking for a brighter future, and so science fiction reflected it. I think nowadays we are really pessimistic, and I think again our literature is going to reflect that. I think that's what science fiction does well. It either entices you with a vision of a better future, or it tries to scare you off and warn you with a vision of how bad things could get. And I mean, I can't even think of any kind of utopian future story that's come out in the last 10 or 15 years at all.
Mm-mm.
Everything else, I think everything's dystopian. And so seeing Star Trek go to dystopian isn't a surprise to me at all. It's just not, because it seems like that's where things are going. And it's definitely making it's definitely a commentary of
political satire and
of what's going on now, for sure. And the whole idea of, immigration and who has a right to be wherever, and this whole idea of isolationism and all of that, and certainly things that we've been talking about politically in the United States definitely is being reflected in the show. But again, I see why some people might not be cool with that.
Right. I don't see it on your list over there. Did you see today that Robert Kirkland confirmed what caused the walkers?
Yes, I saw that.
That's what, talking about dystopia and, zombie apocalypses and things. So you saw that, right?
Yeah. The thing about it is it's very similar to the setup that was in Night of the Living Dead, because they shot down the Venus probe. And there was a thought that there was something on the probe, some sort of radiation or a virus, and apparently Kirkman confirmed, of course, that there's some sort of space spore.
Space spore!
Although
brilliant, yes.
But, the thing about it, too, is that
the blob. It's, we've
gotten to the
War
point.
of the Worlds.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely,
Screwfly Solution, sorry.
It's very, the whole thing of it came from outer space is, it's because there's so much mystery in space, you can get away with saying something like, in the 50s and the 60s, with Marvel Comics, everybody got superpowers through radiation, because, we were just now starting to understand it.
Yeah. In the 50s, the blob, it did come from outer space, but in the 80s, the blob, it was the government, what did we do? How did we do something? So, this entire time we've been thinking, how did we screw up in Walking Dead? What did we do? What did we stupid humans do this time? Which, The Stand, that was, we stupid humans messing around. And now that it's confirmed, nope, not us.
Well, maybe or maybe not. It really depends on how the spore got here. How did that happen? This is very much like the Andromeda strain.
Okay, I haven't. If I have, I don't remember Andromeda strain.
Well, you would remember.
Okay,
it if you,
then no, I haven't.
It's a novel, and it was. I want to say it was like late 50s, early 60s movie.
Okay.
It's a color film. Fantastic film, by the way. If you ever get a chance to see it. But yeah, it's all about this. It's about this group of scientists trying to figure out this virus and how it works, because people are dying. People are dying, and it had a space origin to it, but it was definitely a situation where we did this to ourselves.
Okay.
As well. But of course, Kirkman makes a good point. It's like he didn't really go into any of the background, because how would any of these characters know any of it?
Yep. Can't.
Things had fallen apart so quickly, and who would care?
Yeah.
Did it come from space? Did it come from a volcanic eruption? Did the government try to come up with some sort of chemical warfare, some kind of biological warfare that went wrong? At this point, does it matter?
Nope.
No, some of our friends are trapped in a cave, and what are they going to do? I mean, that's, you have to deal with what's right in front of you. So it was never really going to come up, except for that one moment with Eugene where he's like, I'm from the CDC and I know what the cure is and I got to get to Washington.
Dirty liar.
Yeah, it was like the one little bit of hope. You're like, oh, wait a minute. This thing could be cured. At this point in Walking Dead, we're not even thinking about it anymore. No one's even thinking, well, how are we going to fix things and get it back to normal? I mean, that's too late.
This is the new normal.
This is the new normal. It's too late for that. So, but of course, if we're going to talk science fiction, we're definitely going to what we got to talk about.
Doctor Who. Maybe we should call the Doctor Who segment Who Goes There.
Yeah, maybe so. And boy, do we got a lot to talk about on this last episode. just the craziest things.
It was definitely a fan squealing moment.
Well, yeah, there was definitely a lot of that, and squealing for a lot of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit of Doctor Who news. Jodie Whittaker has, in fact, announced that she has signed up for the next season of Doctor Who.
Fantastic.
So no regenerations at the end of this this season, but some other news came out that Tossin Cole has just been cast in a lead role in a television season for AMC. The name of the show is 61st Street, and he plays a young man who's he's in high school. He's getting ready. He's a senior. He's getting ready to graduate. He's a runner. He's gotten a full scholarship to go to college. He lives in Chicago. And before any of this could really happen for him, before he can graduate, he gets arrested by the Chicago police because they think he's a gang leader.
Oh no!
And what makes it worse is that a drug bust has recently gone wrong, and a policeman was shot and killed. And so they are looking to pin something heavy on it, So this is going to be a 2-season show, and they've already locked it down. It's going to be 2 seasons, and that's it.
I'll be interested to hear his American accent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's going to be a courtroom drama, and it's going to definitely focus on problems with, lack of justice and, just that kind of stuff, that happens in big cities, and racial tensions and all of that stuff. Now, the thing about it is, if Tossin's going to be doing this, how's he going to be doing Doctor Who?
Oh,
yeah, because those filming the episodes of Doctor Who, especially if you're one of the companions, I mean, it's not like you can take a break.
No,
So, but if he's leaving at the end of this season. Of course, I think you've seen the second trailer, the mid-season trailer for Doctor Who. And there's that one scene where you hear Ryan saying, is this how long is this going to go on? I mean, is this what our life's going to be from now on? It's like, well, apparently not for Ryan. Something's going to happen. Are they going to kill him off? Is he going to leave the TARDIS? We're already now starting to see some tensions between, among the family, shall we say?
Yeah.
But with good reason. Because, of course, we have episode 5 now, Fugitive of the Jadoon. And it did feel kind of like a mid-season because they piled a lot of stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff to unpack. In fact, I feel like we kind of have to split this into 2.
Yeah.
Because you got to unpack one part of this, and then we got to unpack the other part of it. And it's just like each one of these things is definitely its own subject. But let's start out with Captain Jack is back.
Yay!
So, but man, there was a lot of stuff to unpack there. And of course, you have to have that wonderful moment. Graham has never seen Captain Jack before, and he
gets a good snog off Captain Jack. Yes.
But again, it's like everybody, including John Barrowman, everyone's been saying, when are we going to see him again? When are we going to see him again? And of course, with this episode, we get 2 Davies creations. We get the Jadoon again, and we get Captain Jack Harkness. But man, he had a lot to say in that episode because he was trying to scoop up the Doctor, totally missed her, didn't even get a chance to see her.
No,
grabbed everybody else.
Yep.
But it basically warns her that about something that's going to happen in the future, and we've already seen part of it in the trailers because we've seen this tarnished, rusted Cyberman. Of course, we didn't know what that was all about, but apparently, according to Jack Harkness, is that there was this organization called the Alliance. We don't know who they are. He didn't explain, but apparently a very powerful organization and strong enough to have time travel. And he said they sent something. He didn't say someone. He said something. Sent something back in time to destroy the Cybermen. Very much like what the Time Lords did with the Doctor to send him back, to
Skaro, right?
To Skaro for to deal with the Daleks before they were ever created.
And that was the first appearance of Davros.
Yes.
And because I can remember Tom Baker standing there holding those two wires, getting ready, and he's looking. He's like, "Can I do this?" Even though he knows how evil they are, he's like, "Can I be responsible for the eradication of an entire race?"
Right.
You know.
And don't think he doesn't get that thrown back into his face. Well, we could say Peter Capaldi, if you guys remember that episode. Of course, I know you still need to catch up on Capaldi, but yeah, that whole situation gets thrown right back into his face. But so apparently the Cybermen Empire was utterly destroyed except for one. There's a lone Cyberman. And Captain Jack sends the warning, don't give it what it wants at all costs. So it sounds like there's going to be a very difficult choice to be made here, and it's going to be the Doctor's job to make a difficult choice. Now, of course, Captain Jack says, if she ever needs me, I'll be there. As far as we know, it's not going to be this season. This is the only time we see him this season. We might see him next season. But then again, the first rule, they always said, the first rule of the Doctor is the Doctor always lies. At the same time, the first rule of Doctor Who is that the showrunners always lie. So who knows? There's no telling if we're going to see Captain Jack. But they're basically saying, no, that's it that's going to be it for the season. But we do want to bring him back. So I would hope so, because don't tease us. Give us a little bit of him and then we don't get to see him again. That's not fair. But yeah, but there's a lot of questions here. Who is this alliance? The last time we saw any kind of an alliance, it was back in the Matt Smith days, where you had all the villains who got together to put the Doctor in the Pandorica.
When Stephen Fry was on the show, it was made like they made a very distinct statement of saying there is no Torchwood, there is no unit, there is no, those, they don't exist anymore.
Right.
So is the alliance what is replacing them, kind of thing?
Yeah. Is there some sort of universal thing? Or the thing about it is, are they an offshoot of the CIA? And of course, by CIA, I mean Celestial Intervention Agency. There's no telling. But the thing about it is they're certainly powerful enough to have time travel and ruthless enough to use it. The fact that they would send something back in time to destroy all the Cybermen and
Skynet.
Yeah. To such a degree that they were successful, that one Cyberman out of the legions of Cybermen, one survived. And didn't get off without a scratch for sure. So that becomes the question: who is this alliance? We don't know who they are. We don't know much about them. We definitely know they're powerful, and we also seem to know that they're the Doctor might not be too cool with how they do what they do. I mean, he had his issues with Torchwood for sure, but they do seem to be a little bit Machiavellian. And I guess the question is, what is Jack Harkness's relationship with them? If he's part of the alliance, is he trying to change things like he did in Torchwood? Trying to try to improve things from the inside, like going back to that sort of thing. But again, one thing about this episode, they didn't feel like they needed to explain a whole lot to us. They said, well, it's better off to leave you with questions, and there are a lot of questions there. But not nearly as many questions as what the Doctor was having to deal with while her companions were dealing with Jack, and that's
Doctor.
So let's talk about Ruth Clayton, the tour guide. Ruth Clayton's the Doctor.
Yep.
Holy cow.
The Doctor who doesn't know our current Doctor. So there's a whole lot of, fan theories going on.
Yeah.
Where did she, what number of regeneration is she? Is she from some other plane? Is she, is the Doctor a title and not a person? All kinds of, great stuff going on.
There's a lot of theories going on. Now, of course, the one thing we're being told, and Chris Chibnall has already, he said, he's like, look, this is not some other dimensional being, whatever. This is the Doctor.
And Lost also said that it's not purgatory.
Yeah,
The island is not purgatory.
Well, let me restate what I've said earlier. The first rule of Doctor Who is the showrunners always lie. So,
and they tell us that they're lying to us because also the master said everything you've been taught is a lie.
Yeah. So there's a possibility that as far as timelines go, now here's the thing. Here's what I was able to glean from a lot of what was going on in this episode. When you see Ruth the Doctor's TARDIS, it definitely looks a lot like Hartnell's / Troughton's TARDIS. It looks like that old school white TARDIS. So I have a feeling, this is my theory, and again, there's a ton of theories. If you go online, you'll see a ton of them. My theory is that this is an earlier Doctor.
Earlier than Hartnell. So
well, I don't think earlier than Hartnell.
Okay.
The reason being was Hartnell was supposed to be the one who left Gallifrey. Okay. So here's my theory, and I think some other people might be on road with this, is when the second Doctor, when Troughton became Pertwee, the third Doctor, there was a little bit of a space between those two. I mean, you didn't see a regeneration, but there wasn't really a typical one. I mean, first of all, this was going to be the second regeneration ever on the show. But also, it was forced on by the Time Lords, who basically caught up with the Doctor and then exiled him on Earth, where he couldn't travel. But there's a gap between the last Troughton episode, which is in black and white, and then it becomes color, and you see Pertwee fall out of the TARDIS.
Yeah.
So there have been a lot of theories.
Dorothy comes out of the house.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. There have been all of these talks about what they called Season 6B. That some things may have happened between when Troughton was when he was exiled and changed, and then between Pertwee, because there are certain episodes in the old Doctor Who series that continuity-wise are problematic. One of them is, of course, he'd been running from the Time Lords, and the first time you even hear a mention of the Time Lords is that last Troughton episode, where he is forced to contact the Time Lords. He tries to escape after he contacts them and is captured, and his companions are sent back with their minds wiped, and he's changed. But there are, as I was saying, there's a couple of episodes. One is the Three Doctors, where where the second Doctor is helping the third Doctor, and the first Doctor with issues the Time Lords are having. Why would he do that? First of all, the second thing is there's an episode of the Six Doctors series, the Colin Baker series. It's called The Two Doctors, and involves the second Doctor, who's working in concert with the Time Lords. He's delivering a message for the Time Lords. He's there with Jamie, his companion, who had been mind wiped and sent back to Scotland. And both of them are obviously old, they look older. So people were wondering, people wondered, how is that possible since Troughton was changed and sent to Earth? Why would he be working with the Time Lords? I mean, where is that in continuity? So some fans came up with this theory of 6B, which was that the Time Lords exiled him, but they didn't do it right away. And he worked, the Doctor was basically forced to work with the Time Lords, but eventually that broke down and he was sent to Earth to begin his exile. So here is my theory on this, and I think some other people may have come up with the same theory, is I think what happened was that the Troughton, the second Doctor, did in fact, he was working with the Time Lords. As he's being the Doctor, decided that he had enough. And so he fakes his death. There was, of course, Gat, the other Time Lord. The Time Lord, I don't know if she was an assassin necessarily, but there's some sort of leader of some group, a Gallifreyan group. But she basically faked her funeral, and of course Gat it said, all of Gallifrey attended her funeral. So she basically faked her death and escaped, and then used the chameleon arc to become human so she couldn't be found. She did what David Tennant did to try to escape the family of blood. Eventually, that wasn't going to pan out. But that's,
and Jacoby did it when he was the master.
Yeah. So My feeling about this is that perhaps what happened is that eventually the Time Lords are going to catch up with the 2.5. Let's just call her 2.5.
Okay.
You know, they're going to catch up with her. They're going to force her to regenerate into Pertwee, but they're also going to wipe from the Doctor's mind
that she ever existed.
That's my theory.
Okay.
Which I think might explain why. I mean, why the Ruth Doctor.
So maybe she'll get a clever moniker like the War Doctor. You know, John Hurt got the War Doctor, so you know maybe she'll be the Blank Doctor. I don't know.
Well, there's no telling.
It's what the fans decide.
Yeah, possibly so, or at least what the showrunners decide they're going to come up with. But at the same time,
no, the fans decide stuff like that.
Oh, is that how that works?
Like the ship names? Oh yeah. Fans decide the ship names.
Well,
so
it's funny you mention that because, of course, the name of the captain of the Jadoon was Paul Conton, which was named after Paul Conton, who was a Doctor Who superfan who passed away.
Oh.
So they named that character after him. But so yeah, this is, like I said, this is my theory. Again, we've been told this is not this is not some sort of alternate reality. But again, the first rule of Doctor Who is that the showrunners always lie. But my feeling is this is a regeneration between the second and the third Doctor, who eventually, who tried to escape the Time Lords, failed to do so. Eventually, gets caught, forced to regenerate, and exiled on Earth, and memories of that regeneration were wiped. Now, where this story kind of falls apart, obviously, is how do you explain that you're short of regeneration? Because the only reason why the 12th Doctor, Matt Smith, was able to regenerate was because he was given a new life cycle by the Time Lords. If there was another regeneration of the Doctor in there, then that means that when David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, when he regenerated, well, he shouldn't have been able to regenerate. So we've got an entire extra regeneration. We got to figure out where did it come from. So, and my only thought on that is perhaps when the Time Lords forced a regeneration on Troughton, it didn't count. So, and the thing about it is that, when they regenerated the Doctor, instead of regenerating into Pertwee, maybe regenerated him into this Doctor 2.5, which means that as far as the timeline is concerned, the 13th Doctor is not the first female. It's not the first female regeneration of the Doctor. And of course, there was a mention, Peter Capaldi had said that he thought, that Doctor had said he was pretty sure he was a guy back at a certain point, but he wasn't sure. So if he'd been white guys the whole time, it would have been easier to remember, I think. So they might have been, well, I don't know if necessarily they'd been building it up that far back, but again, it doesn't answer all the questions for sure. And the thing is, this episode certainly didn't. They asked a lot of questions, they didn't give a lot of answers. And that one scene where the 13th Doctor gets kicked off of the TARDIS, where the Ruth Doctor or Doctor 2.5 or whatever we're going to call the Doctor, this Doctor who's the first African American to play the Doctor, so we're getting that. But when
English,
yeah,
first black woman,
there you go,
first black person.
Oh, that's true, because she's English. Because I'm an American and therefore I'm very xenophobic, so I always say African American, of course, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So thank you for pointing that out for me, for sure. But first person of color to play the Doctor, for sure. The thing about it too is that, of course, when the 13th Doctor was dropped off back on Earth, the look on her face, the shell-shocked look on her face was pretty much the same face we all had on our faces. Because we're like, she's thinking the same thing we're thinking. What the heck just happened here? We don't, we hadn't, they set all of this stuff up. And they're not going to answer it anytime soon. This next episode, I don't think is going to visit any of this at all. They're just going to let that stew. When are we going to see the Ruth Doctor again? Probably. I just don't know when. I mean, it's not like we haven't got enough stuff already on our plates. who is this timeless child? What happened that was, what is the secret of the Time Lords that's so horrible that the Master was like, oh, the heck with it. I'm destroying everything. I'm destroying all the Gallifrey. I can't deal with this. What's going on there? And then, of course, now we're tacking on who is this alliance who's so powerful that they could destroy an entire civilization of Cybermen, down to one Cyberman. Who is this Ruth Doctor? What's her story? Where does all this stuff fit in? There are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers so far. And of course, depending on who you talk to in fandom, they either really like it or they don't. Some of it, I think, has to do with, there's a lot of theories going around because we don't have answers. And some of the people don't like some of the theories. And I'm thinking, well, you can't really hate the show over a theory that somebody has. It's like, we don't know what the truth is yet until they decide they're going to tell us. It certainly has me interested. I've said this on the show before. One of the issues I had with Stephen Moffat, although I really enjoy his writing in general, is that he always one of the problems he had with Doctor Who for sure was that he was very often loved to write himself in a corner to see if he could write himself out of it. He would come up with this big concept and a mystery, and then he would, without any idea of how he was going to end it, he would just paint himself into a corner and say, how do I get myself out of it? And he didn't always stick the landing for sure. So I don't think Chibnall is necessarily doing that. I'm pretty sure that he knows where he's going with this story, but that's going to be the big question. Where do we go from here? They're definitely building something. But it's probably going to be a while before we get any answers to it, but it'll definitely be something that we check out. But of course, the next episode is going to be, again, it's not a straight line from this. It's going to be a different mystery. So that'll be the question: is where do they go from here? But certainly, when the show comes up, we'll definitely talk about it. But of course, that'll be this weekend. I've seen a little bit of the trailer for that episode. We've seen that they look like killer birds, I guess, swarm of, but apparently there's some mystery that this is a global phenomenon. So, but they haven't really said a lot about the episode. But and it's called Praxis. So, but I guess when we see it, we'll definitely talk about it, and as this mystery continues to develop. Mystery upon mystery. So as these mysteries begin to develop and we find out more about it, we'll definitely talk about it here on the program. So with that said, we come to the end of episode 98 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.